You know, I've had my fair share of freaking out, I think. I never thought so, but so I'm told.
Laura Dern possesses a special talent of playing a very particular type of middle-aged woman of a certain social class who is barely keeping her sanity intact.
Maybe he should have shown a woman a little respect!
People were obsessed with Laura Dern's character in Big Little Lies, Renata Klein. And when Marriage Story came out, Laura Dern completely stole the show with her portrayal of a ruthless divorced lawyer Nora Fanshawe.
I'm gonna stop you there. When you do this for real, don't ever say that.
But I think one role that got hugely overlooked and underappreciated by general public was Amy Jellicoe from an HBO show Enlightened.
I will kill you, motherfucker!
In a way, Amy gave birth to all of those other female characters Laura Dern has since played. Enlightened was a show that had a 2-season run on HBO from 2011 to 2013, before it was cancelled. It was created by Mike White together with Laura Dern. You might know Mike as a creator, writer, and director of the biggest mainstream hit series The White Lotus, which I still haven't watched and I'm deeply ashamed of myself. I hate the way social media makes you feel out of the loop. Enlightened was loved by critics. Dern won a Golden Globe for Best Actress in a Television Series in 2012, but it didn't save the show. The ratings were poor and the show struggled to find the audience. Enlightened has no mystery, no juicy drama, and no solid plot to an extent, at least in the first season. It's so hard sometimes to explain what a show or a movie is about. You don't want to sound pretentious and say, well, there's nothing like this out there, but sometimes it's the only thing you can say. Go in blind, let it emotionally destroy you, and then feel it build you anew. The premise goes like this. Amy Jellicoe is an executive at a global corporation who suddenly gets demoted. She doesn't take the news very well and has a public meltdown in the office.
You look insane.
She suspects that the reason she's getting transferred to a different department is because she slept with her married boss.
We fucked. So what?
Amy ends up taking a leave to go to a wellness rehabilitation center in Hawaii, where she has an awakening, or you can say enlightenment. When she returns, she finds herself struggling to apply all her newly learned spiritual lessons to her real life.
He fucking betrays his wife and I'm the one that gets punished?
Mike White knew that this show was hard to sell. First of all, as I've said, it's a niche series. It's not a noisy show, it's slow and reflective, it's hilarious and hopeful, it's bleak and depressing.
Isn't it weird you always wake up as yourself?
The emotional shifts that happen within one episode can be a lot. I would describe these 25 to 30-minute episodes as small life insights and observations that will make you ugly sob at 2 a.m. Secondly, the main character is a woman who is 40, and she's not the most considerate person. Both men and women found Amy annoying. They hated her. People compared her to Hannah from HBO Girls, and funny enough, Enlightened used to air every Monday right after Girls. It's the worst thing you can do to a slow-paced show like this. Girls were way noisy and people hate watching it. Like, come on, there's tons of sex and it's about young girls in New York. Enlightened, on the other hand, has little bit of romance, but it's not the focus. And even though it's an HBO show, there's no nudity. There's like one low-key sex scene. I've actually seen one article where the writer said, Amy is one of the girls in 15 years, wrangling with bigger disappointments than she had ever imagined. So let's dive deeper into who Amy Jellicoe is and why some might find her unbearable. When Amy comes back from her wellness trip, she's jobless, practically homeless, and in debt.
It's $24,000?
I already paid off half of it.
$48,000?
But she's full of hope that presents itself in the form of a sea turtle. Amy decides to stay at her mother's place, and the deciding happened without her mother's consent.
Well, how long are you staying?
Just till I save up enough money to get a new place.
But this is what Amy does. She's egocentric, and as a result, she's bad at reading the room. Very bad.
David and I were having an affair.
Yeah, I think everyone knew.
While in rehab, Amy wasn't only focusing on herself and how to control her rage. She got interested in environmental issues and social justice. She felt like she was destined for greatness.
Maybe I am chosen for something, you know?
Thus, after she finishes this wellness program, she embarks on a quest to become a social justice warrior, an activist, an agent of change. Her initial plan to fulfill this purpose is to get her job back. She reevaluated the position she was offered, and now she's full of these cool, eco-minded ideas and she's ready to start working on them. However, during her meeting with HR, she's informed that all the positions have already been filled. There's no job for her. And this is when Amy uses her perfect manipulative negotiation tactics to tell them that she'd consulted with the lawyer and if they fire her, she has all the rights to sue them.
Otherwise, there'd be grounds for a lawsuit, like wrongful termination or something.
To avoid a lawsuit, the HR department reassigns Amy to the literal basement, where she joins a data processing team that consists of company's outcasts who are all testing a software program called Gentiva, which tracks the productivity of all the other workers so that the company can get rid of the slowest ones and save money.
It's like some kind of fucking high-tech warehouse with a bunch of carnival freaks.
Funny enough, the corporation's name, Abaddon, translates to a place of destruction or the depths of hell. Amy's given Abaddon 15 years of her life. It seems to be the only job she has ever known, probably got it right after graduation. Enlightened is spectacular at showing the nitty-gritty of the corporate world and how a company can chew you up and spit you out no matter how devoted you are to them. And don't get me started on fake-friendly HR department who, quote-unquote, cares about your well-being. The show nailed it. Amy's new position is repetitive and mundane. All you have to do all day is enter numbers into the computer. This is obviously not what Amy envisioned for her dream life. This is the exact opposite.
This is not.
Amy immediately starts looking for a new job during her work hours. She's searching for nonprofit jobs in social work. And if you remember, she's in debt. And if you're thinking, but these jobs don't pay enough, you would be correct and surprised how naive Amy is sometimes. Her assertive nature helps her get an interview at a homeless shelter. But to go there, she has to miss hours of her work, which she doesn't mind doing even after her failed attempt at making an excuse to her new boss.
Gynecologist?
Is it serious?
It's a checkup.
Then no.
What?
During Amy's tour around the shelter, she's beaming with joy. But when she asks about the salary, the reality finally hits her.
The starting salary is $500 a week now.
And this is when some viewers can't stand her. Here you have a person who talks big, but who can't live up to their own ideas. Oh, she wants to do good things, but when there's no reward, she's out? What a bitch, right? It's very hard for some to get past this first layer of judgment. When Amy has a mini breakdown afterwards, the director of the shelter says the most tear-jerking thing to her.
You know, there's all this good that I want to do, all these things I want to do, and then I just can't.
You do what you can, Amy.
How can you help others if you're yourself a big mess? You do what you can. And this is what I like about Mike White's writing. He doesn't divide his characters into heroes and villains. Quote, I do get criticism, but at the same time, Enlightened was an example of trying to see something from many perspectives. And while I guess my affinity is with Amy, I see the arrogant side of her too, and the narcissism that comes with that I see in myself. So it's about trying to be as honest about the character as possible, while at the same time wanting the audience to take her seriously. But I think the problem with Enlightened was that if I had made Amy a little bit more of a hero, then maybe it would have gotten a bigger audience. But I also think that would have undercut what I was trying to do. End quote. Amy's flaw is that she has this romanticized version of what being good and doing good mean. As Mike White explained, it's not enough for her to just volunteer or recycle. She wants bigger things and a bigger life. She wants to be the next Joan of Arc.
I'm just tired of feeling small.
And it's interesting that in different interviews Mike mentions Joan of Arc. As you might know, it's believed that she heard voices of angels and saints that were telling her that she had a mission. And in Enlightened, Mike White ends and sometimes starts the episodes with Amy's voiceover, a small monologue which is very moving and soothing and poetic.
You don't have to run away from life your whole life. You can really live.
They are lessons Amy learns by the end of each day. These lessons are based on some general self-help concepts, but there is a very personal and sincere feel to them, like they are taken from a journal or a diary. And no matter how cringy and funny the episode might seem at first,
Amy, are you going to wear that to work? You look like a hippie.
Yeah.
those last 2 minutes of Laura Dern's soft voice will wreck you so good you would want to take a breather, you know?
Why does something have to always be missing?
Almost every episode on season 1 is its own standalone story. If you look at the episode where Amy is looking for a new job, it starts with Amy telling you that sometimes when she's lying in bed late at night, she thinks about other people's lives, the love they have and the pressures they don't, how fulfilled their life is.
And in these moments, I feel empty and wanting.
Amy envisions the life of her ex-assistant Krista, who got promoted and is now working in Amy's old office. Krista is also expecting a baby. This whole episode is about how we compare ourselves to others, how easy we fall into petty narratives about ourselves. By the end of the episode, after Amy returns from the shelter, she repeats the same sentence. Sometimes I think about someone else's life. But this time, she imagines people who don't have any love or friends, people who get crushed by life pressures. And in those moments,
I realize how much I have and how much I have to give.
Sometimes when you want to do something big, you have to start small. And Amy decides to start with people close to her. The first season is focused on Amy's relationship with the following characters: her mother Helen, who can't let go of a traumatic event of the past, her ex-husband Levi, who is a drug addict, her ex-assistant Krista, I've already mentioned, her new lonely co-worker Tyler, and her new boss Dougie, who carries the show's comedy on his back. At first glance, Amy and her mother Helen might seem to be polar opposites. Amy is loud and dramatic. When she comes into a room, it feels like there are 5 of her there.
Oh, God!
Helen, on the other hand, seems a bit apathetic, but there is lingering sadness in her eyes. She just wants to be left alone. She's not a very affectionate mother.
It's good to see you, Mom.
Why?
But sometimes, Helen can put flowers in Amy's room to make her feel better, or comfort her when she's too overwhelmed. In episode 5, titled Not Good Enough Mothers, Amy is forced to take public bus to and from work for a week because her car wouldn't start. This week is not a regular one. It's a week of heavy rains. What makes it worse for Amy is the fact that Helen has a car she occasionally uses to drive to the grocery store. Will she lend this car to her daughter? Absolutely not.
I told you, Amy, no. You're not insured to drive it.
To Helen, her reasoning is valid and clear, but to Amy, it's mind-blowing that a mother can't do something so simple for her child. Isn't it a proof of love?
It's raining outside. My God, it's nighttime. I'm your daughter.
It seems that Helen wasn't always this cold. In episode 9, that is fully dedicated to her, you'll learn that Amy's father took his own life in the garage of their house after a failed work deal. Amy and her sister were little, so Amy doesn't really talk about him. Sadly, Amy's sister never appears on the show. But Helen never remarried. She also never moved out of that house. In every corner, she sees the ghost of the past. Sometimes it brings happy memories, and other times not so much.
I don't mind being alone. Conversation's better.
Because of this, Helen failed to give Amy the attention and love she deserved. And as a result, like Amy's ex-husband said, Amy has a void she's trying to fill.
But I could never give her what she really wanted, which was your love.
This episode features 3 different mothers. Besides Helen, there's Krista, who's having her baby shower, and a Mexican mother of 2 who's getting deported. Obviously, Amy gets fixated on the Mexican mom. She wants to go to the rally in her support. She tries inviting all her co-workers to do the same. Unfortunately, due to pouring rain, she doesn't go.
The rally's probably canceled.
But Amy craves something even bigger. She wants to organize a women's group at Abaddon.
We could talk about issues that women who are gay have.
All of these things are good, but Amy again gets so blinded by her ideas that she ends up hurting a person along the way who she considers a friend, Krista. Despite Amy knowing how to turn on her charms, communicate, be friendly, she doesn't have any real long-term friends.
You'd get a fix on a girl, and then you'd have a falling out, and all the tears.
People who she deems to be her friends are just tolerating her, and you understand both sides of the coin. Amy makes mistakes like any other person, but she's never malicious. Sometimes she gets so up in her head that she can't see past her own nose. Krista's flaw is that she doesn't want to be upfront with Amy and tell her that she doesn't want to be her friend. Krista chooses not to invite Amy to her baby shower. However, one of the co-workers accidentally spills the news to Amy, and when Amy confronts Krista, she chickens out and lies.
Of course you were invited. Maybe it just went to your junk box or something.
Since Amy is so engrossed in her new ideas, she's late to the baby shower and she doesn't get any present for Krista. Still, it's not the worst thing Amy does. As people go one by one, congratulating the new mom, Amy decides to give her speech. And you've guessed it, it's about a mother that gets deported to Mexico. And Amy doesn't forget to promote her women's group.
We think we have problems, like that family has problems.
Stealing people's moments and making everything about you is a special skill Amy Jellicoe possesses.
You're always so angry.
I am not angry.
Yeah, you are.
And don't you worry, she'll fuck up Krista's day of labor too.
Oh, make it about you, Amy.
At the end of the episode, Amy and Helen, with tears in their eyes, watch how the Mexican mother is getting separated from her kids on TV. In this moment, Amy finally realizes that she has all this compassion for the woman she's never met, but almost none for her own mother. A mother is a child too, she says.
I will stop waiting for you to be the perfect mother. I will be the mother I wanted you to be.
The episode actually ends with Amy buying toys to donate to the kids. Mike White noted, quote, "As you get older, you realize just figuring out how to be nice to the people in your personal sphere is almost more challenging than trying to change the bigger culture. That is something the whole show gets at. You can be right about all of these injustices in the world, but how are you actually living your life? How are you treating people?" End quote. Amy actually takes after her mother. Both of them are stubborn and self-centered and blunt, and even though Amy blames Helen for holding onto the past, she does the same thing when it comes to her ex-husband, Levi. In episode 4, titled The Weekend, while meditating, Amy tries to envision the time she was happy. She recalls a particular day when she, Levi, and their dog Frankie went on a hike. Amy was pregnant, and everything at that moment felt right. And then she immediately remembers how it all went wrong. First, they lost their baby, then Frankie, then Levi started partying and cheating. Finally, the divorce happened. After their split, Amy fell apart. She started drinking every weekend with her coworkers, which allegedly led to her affair with her boss and her ultimate breakdown. Levi is Amy's first love. She has spent the majority of her life with him. Even though Amy knows that Levi has a huge drug problem, she can't separate herself from him. She can call him in the middle of the night. She can come to his place unannounced. The funny thing is that Levi never pushes Amy away.
My door's always open, and I don't judge.
Particularly in this episode, Amy books her and Levi a kayaking expedition, and she obviously doesn't take no for an answer.
So I'll pick you up about 7.
In the morning?
Yeah.
So off they drive. Their trip starts off in a nice way, and Amy's heart instantly fills with hope.
We can be free of our sad stories.
This hope quickly gets crushed when Amy finds a stash of drugs in Levi's bag. She decides to dump them in the river.
Amy!
Their kayaking expedition concludes with buying new drugs for Levi and spending the night in a motel. This is by far one of the most brutal episodes. Just a single tear on Amy's cheek as she watches her ex-husband get high is enough. Amy can save him because he doesn't want to be saved.
When I'm sober, it's all so much worse.
Even if you try, you can't escape the story of your life. There is only one way to move on, and that would be to own it.
It happened. The baby died. The dog died. The heart broke.
By the end of the season, Levi finally asks for help and agrees to go to the same rehab center in Hawaii. Season 2 of Enlightened shifts from the poignant interpersonal stories and meditative voiceovers to a whistleblowing drama. Mike White revealed that this part of Amy's story, her exposing Abaddon, was supposed to happen in Season 1. This was his pitch to HBO, but I can't help but wonder that consciously or subconsciously, he was trying to make the show more engaging for the general public. There's more romance and the plot is more linear. For the longest time, Amy didn't care what her department did.
What are we doing in this department? I mean, what are these numbers?
She would always be late, and she would always do her own thing. And her thing was reading and collecting articles about how Abaddon's products are affecting environment. Abaddon is one of the largest drugstore chains in the world. Her women's group idea failed, so she decides to shift her focus on this research. Knowing Amy and how pushy she can be, her ex-boss Damon gives her a chance to present it in front of all of her ex-colleagues. So Amy does, and everyone laughs at her.
Am I the only one who sees this?
Being constantly made fun of and not taken seriously culminates in Amy's idea to hack into Damon's private emails and dig dirt on the company, and Tyler can help her with it. The question people have is, does Amy do it for the greater good, or does she do it out of spite as a revenge? And the answer is probably both.
But we can be whistleblowers or maybe even heroes.
Oh, yeah, right.
The show is so smart for not making a complete asshole out of Amy, but also not turning her into a saint. Everybody knows that if Amy was given her previous position, she very likely wouldn't have taken it this far with her activism. At the same time, this is how people make a change. You get into a situation, you don't like it, the next step is to do something about it. Should you ruin other people's lives along the way though? That's debatable. As Mike White noted, every action has positive and negative reaction. Sometimes, by doing something good, you might not notice that you are literally stepping on the foot of the person right next to you. And Enlightened gives you a lot of such examples.
They said that I hacked the system or something, which I didn't do.
Tyler and Amy learn that the company is planning on shutting their department down as soon as they're done entering all the data.
We don't have a job. They're firing all of us.
Knowing this helps them get their boss Dougie on board with their plan.
They're shutting down Coach and Tiva?
I know.
Amy also reaches out to a reporter, Jeff Flender, who works at LA Times and writes corporate exposés.
This is it. This is the beginning.
Jeff tells Amy that what she's found is not enough to write a whole article about. She needs to get access to CEO's emails and find proof of him paying off government officials. And she finds it. Jeff is Amy's window into the world of social and political activism and Twitter. Oh, wait till Amy gets on Twitter.
Hey, Lewis.
Yeah?
Are you on Twitter?
Do I look like I'm on Twitter?
Jeff is educated and well-read. He is who Amy wants to be, so she falls for him, hard.
This is it. This is the angel sent to you from the other world.
Jeff reciprocates Amy's feelings, but he doesn't take their relationship as seriously as Amy. And it's awful to see because you know where this is going.
I like spending time with you.
Me too. Let's talk tomorrow, okay?
Okay, yeah.
While Amy is living in this dreamland with Jeff, Levi comes back from the rehab. And as funny as it sounds, he's a changed man and he wants a second chance. This episode is ironically titled All I Ever Wanted. What happens when you get exactly what you want and you realize that it's the worst thing ever? It's hilarious and tragic. Coming back to that question of whether Amy wants to do something good or retaliate against the company, towards the end when the article is done and ready to be published with Amy's name and photo in it, Amy gets a chance to meet the CEO of Abaddon, and he tells her that he can give her her dream job position. Naively believing she can change a huge corporation from within, Amy seriously considers this offer.
What would be the best thing here? You know, what would bring about the most good?
The end of the second season mirrors the beginning of the first in many ways. For example, showing the CEO of Abaddon go ballistic after Amy as she's trying to leave.
I will fucking crush you!
At the very end, Amy is fired, so she's jobless again. She's still in debt, with multi-million-dollar lawsuit now hovering over her head.
They said they're gonna sue me.
Well, we knew that was gonna happen.
We did?
She's kicked out of Helen's house,
I'll move out. I think you should.
and she's single again because Jeff breaks up with her. A perfect ending for a bittersweet show like this. You just wonder, who the hell won? Seems like nobody. But one thing never changes, and that is hope. Quote, the whole episode she's asking, am I a fool? Am I a witch? Am I crazy? And she's all of those different things at different times. That's what I feel is true about her. As absurd as some of the ways she goes about affecting change are, it's coming from a place of feeling that change is possible. So many people come at it from a more cynical place. And I like that about her. That's what she ultimately symbolizes. Somebody who's hopeful, but doesn't necessarily know how to place it. End quote.
Am I crazy?
No, you're just full of hope.
Enlightened is a show about trying your best and being a work in progress. When people talk about shows or movies that they think deserved better, they usually say something like, well, if it came out today, it would have been a hit. Or if people marketed it a certain way, more people would have watched it. And when I look at Enlightened, I go, nope, this is not about the show. Enlightened did arrive right before the rise of streaming, I believe, and streaming helps little gems find their right audience, which is great. But probably the only thing that can help is if people watch The White Lotus and then through Mike White find Enlightened. That would be nice. And Laura Dern would appreciate it too, you know?
I hope anyone who hasn't seen it could watch it and find her relatable, because I think she's just an adorable mess.